All right, hello everybody and welcome back to Nature News. We have actually a really cool talk for you today on what is right behind us on Old Ice Pond. So it is difficult for us to kind of give you a really look underneath the water, but what we want to talk about today is the fish that are living in Old Ice Pond. So underneath the surface of the water, it's very shallow here. It's probably only about 6 feet deep at its deepest, so it's not a pretty shallow pond, but there's lots of aquatic vegetation. There are lots of larval insects, fish and turtles, frogs. You can see some egrets in the background. Let's see if I can point them. There, egrets in the background. There are also some eagles up over here, which are difficult to see now, but maybe they'll fly overhead in just a few minutes. But we're going to talk to you specifically today about some of the freshwater fish that call Old Ice Pond its home. So we've got some different educators joining us. So first up is Tony. He's going to talk to you about one of our most common fish here.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. How's everyone doing today? Good to see you, or have vice versa there. Welcome down for our fish talk. We can't talk about the refuge without talking about the fish because this is an important part of our ecosystem here. And as Renee said, this is the most common fish here in the pond, which is the bluegill sunfish. Who's seen it on the bridge or overlooking one of the overpasses and taking a look and see these little small fish that kind of look like piranhas sitting in the water? So about, let's see, 4 to 10 inches, sometimes 4 to 12 inches. You can kind of see that there. The bluegill sunfish has some very vibrant colors. On the top, you'll see some blue facial fins on the top section. On the bottom, some orangey red sections on its belly. But it's mostly known for this spot right here. This black back fin right here, this posterior section over its gill. And that spot is what it's known for. So if you do see them, they're usually hanging out in a small school waiting for food to fall in. They're very opportunistic feeders, so that means they're omnivores. They'll eat all types of vegetation and plants, but mostly they like insects and insect larvae. They'll also eat other small fish in the water. So when you look around, most of the time people say, what fish am I looking at in the water? If it's about the size of your hand, that's usually the bluegill sunfish. There's a couple of interesting things about them though. Their behaviors are pretty interesting. This is the time now that they start to nest or create their nest sites, and that starts from late April all the way through the summer, so late spring into the summer. And when they start to get their nesting sites, they're looking for an area that they can clear, and the males will do this first. They'll go out there, they'll search for a section, they'll clear the area up with a small depression, sometimes up to a foot or more, and they'll move all the vegetation aside, have rocks and gravel, and they'll wait. They'll wait for a female to come close. So this is what we get to see now. As they attract the female, hopefully they have the best looking house and they're a strong male because they're designed to protect that nest site. They wait, and when the female finally comes, they can actually spawn thousands of eggs at a time. So that's something cool to see, but what we also witness is this strange thing happening. A little bit of something called mimicry. Down here you can see there's a small fish, a medium size, and a large fish. And the large one is the nice big male who's just made that beautiful nest site, did a lot of hard work. Underneath him is the actual female, but then underneath her is a tiny male who is mimicking the female because he's too small to create a sustainable nest and an area that he can protect on his own. So he'll actually sit there, pretend he's a female, be protected by the male, and when that female's about to lay her eggs, he'll jump in there and fertilize those eggs in place. So it's pretty crazy to see that. So a little bit of mimicry there. That is one sneaky fish right there is what we say. Very cool. All right, so another kind of fish that gets mistaken for the bluegill sunfish is this beauty right here. And this one is anyone good fishing identifiers out there, fish identifiers? Beautiful colors. We don't see it that often, but it's very close to the same size. This is a pumpkin seed sunfish, and you can see that it doesn't have the same kind of coloration as the bluegill. The bluegill has these stripes that kind of go down at the side of its body. But this one is also one that's brought out here. Now these are, they call them panfish, they call them copperhead fish, but The bluegills were actually brought out to different places across America. So they were introduced to a lot of ponds and places, but not only America, they were introduced across the world. So they're pretty invasive in other places. And they do have a very important job in this ecosystem. Being that they eat a lot of crustaceans and insects, they keep that balance. But they also can eat their own body weight or more throughout the season in insects, bugs, and larvae. So they are very important to keep in balance. Now, fish are one of the telltale signs of pollution. We realize these fish are only freshwater fish. So we need to make sure we protect our fishing areas, our freshwater areas, with the chemicals and the runoff that occurs. We also ask that you don't feed them. Even though they look like they're waiting for a treat, bluegills and sunnies will sit there like puppies, and they basically look like they're just begging at the corner, but do not throw any human food or anything like that. It's actually dangerous for them. It can get them sick. So I see a lot of people throwing Cheerios and stuff. That's not meant for them. There's actual fish food you can feed them, which is a great thing to have. So keep that in mind as you check out our creatures here at the refuge. All right, we have some other cool fish coming through with Kara here.
All right, so we did talk about Tony mentioned a couple of the different fish, and so did Renee, but this next fish is at the top of the food chain here in a freshwater pond, and that's a largemouth bass. So they are carnivorous predators, and they're called largemouth bass because of that really huge gaping mouth that they'll use to eat all different types of things. So if you can imagine in a freshwater pond like the one behind us, there's insect larvae, frogs, smaller fish like the pumpkin seed and the bluegills, as well as insect larvae. All different types of things for these bigger fish to eat. So the largemouth bass, being a freshwater carnivore, they prefer clear vegetated freshwater ponds. They can grow up to 30 inches. The largest largemouth bass that was ever caught was 22 pounds, but usually people consider them to be really large at around 5 pounds. And of course, the only animals that are allowed to fish here are osprey and the herons and egrets behind us. We don't allow any fishing here on this pond, but we've seen some really largemouth bass, so that's really exciting. Usually the females are the ones that are largest, and depending on their size, they'll lay eggs comparatively to their size. So the bigger the fish, the more eggs that they'll lay. But like the pumpkin seed and the bluegills, the males will be the ones to build and guard the nest. They'll do that in temperatures from 54 degrees Fahrenheit to 64 degrees. And they're guarding all of those babies that when they hatch, they're called fry. And those little babies will hang out in the nest. It's called a brood swarm. And the males will actually protect their eggs. It can be anywhere from 2,000 to 40,000 eggs at a time for the largemouth bass. And the males will protect their fry or their babies for up to a month at a time. And that's pretty rare in the animal kingdom, right? Even reptiles won't take care of their babies. So these largemouth bass will take care of all of those little fry. So that's really cool. And largemouth bass can actually live up to 25 years old. So some of the fish that we see here in this pond, the larger they are, the bigger they are, which is really cool. So we're going to continue talking about fish that we have in Old Ice Pond behind us. And there's some cool species coming up. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments or the chat as well.
All right, hello everybody. So I'm going to talk to you about a very easy to distinguish fish, and it is the catfish. So this is called a brown bullhead catfish. So these are a species that are living in our ponds, but one that you're not going to often see, and that's because catfish are nocturnal hunters. So catfish are active during the night, and they exist typically in murky bottom habitats. So they can live kind of deep within the water in low oxygen areas. So they have some adaptations that allow them to survive and to thrive in those areas. So one of the things which is where they partly get their name catfish, are those whiskers, right? Those whiskers are very, very important to them. A catfish has 8 whiskers, or at least a brown catfish does. They can vary from about 4 to 8 whiskers, but they have 2 up top, 2 on the very sides of their mouth, and 4 on the bottom. And what's really interesting about their whiskers are actually not made out of hair or like keratin-like a cat's whiskers or another animal's whiskers. They're actually made out of their skin. And catfish, interestingly enough, are actually scaleless, so they don't have scales on their body. But they're made out of their skin, and they have so many different sensory organs on there. Their main sense that they use on those whiskers is not actually touch, which is kind of surprising. The main sense that they use with those whiskers is actually taste. So they go around tasting everything within their environment. They use those more often than their eyes in those murky bottom habitats, and they're able to find their prey that way. These guys will eat small fish, snails, sometimes other small freshwater species, some larval insects, so they eat lots of different things. And catfish are really cool too, because if they lose one of these are called barbels. If they lose one of their barbels, they can actually grow it back. So that's pretty cool, right? Very helpful to them. So catfish are really amazing animals because they can actually exist in very low oxygen conditions. And if the oxygen is so low, they can actually go up to the top of the water and gulp air and use their swim bladder as an emergency lung, which is really amazing. And if the pond that they were in was to dry out, they can actually live within the mud for several days. Until there's hopefully a rainstorm and something to fill the pond back up. So they're very well adapted species, so adapted that they're found on every continent. Even Antarctica, there are fossils found on Antarctica of catfish. And there are 4,000 species of catfish too. So there's lots of different ones. Some are so big that they're almost 700 pounds. Our bullhead catfish that live here though are only about 8 to 16 inches long. They're not that big. And another thing about catfish is many people think that these barbels on a catfish, if you've ever caught a catfish, have you ever seen them do some noodling for catfish? Stick their hands in those dark caves and come up with the catfish in their hand? Well, these are not actually dangerous for people. What actually is dangerous on the catfish is catfish on the backs will have these bony plates and spines on their fins, and those can be dangerous to you if you touch those. Some catfish have bony plates that are like armored plates, which are really cool. And then some species of catfish, as they get older, those scale-like and kind of very sharp protrusions can actually develop to become poisonous in their later age, which is kind of amazing too, right? So these are what's to look out for a catfish. All right, so I think Kara has another animal for you.
Hey, so the geese are making a lot of noise. Can you guys hear them back there? Hopefully they'll come through the pond, but absolutely. So just like the catfish, another nocturnal animal that will live in the pond is this guy right here, the American eel. And this is a freshwater eel that is catadromous. Has anyone ever heard that word, catadromous? That means that they are born in the ocean, they mature in fresh water, just like the pond behind us, and then they will go back to the ocean to spawn their eggs. So this is what a mature American eel looks like, a full-grown American eel. And scientists believe that they have the broadest diversity of habitats that are used by any fish. They've survived through ice ages, so they are an amazingly adapted fish, and they're really cool if you get to see one. But of course, because they're nocturnal, you usually won't see them during the daytime. But they go through a really interesting metamorphosis that I will show you in this next image that we have. So throughout their lifespan, they go through several interesting physical changes. And they actually start, this is the Florida right here, and then the East Coast. What you're seeing in this picture is actually, right here is the Sargasso Sea. And this is where the eggs of the American eel are laid, right in the Sargasso Sea. And this is unique to lots of fish. Just like one of the comments, Opaly, I think it is the opposite of many fish. Most fish are androgynous. So they do the opposite. They lay their eggs in salt water. Then as they mature, they'll go up the coast and into fresh water, just like the pond behind us. So the smaller, when they're laid, they'll hatch into these little see-through hatchlings that are called leptocephali, and they're willow-shaped leaves that are transparent. They float for around a year on the Gulf Stream until they make it as glass eels to the coast, to the Atlantic coast. So when they're glass eels, they're around 2 inches, 2 to 3 inches. They start to develop their fins and they start to develop their shape. And then as elvers, they're migrating to brackish waters, and brackish just means a little bit of salt water and a little bit of fresh water. So if anyone got a chance to watch our Fairy Dell video, that would be where an elver is found. They're migrating to brackish waters all along the East Coast. And then as yellow eels, they're immature adults. Usually they're yellowish green, but they can also be olive brown. And they are gonna go into fresh water. Sometimes they'll stay in estuaries where there's salt water. And they will mature in a freshwater pond like the one behind us, in different types of habitats. And it can take between 2 to 40 years for a yellow eel to mature. So that's pretty amazing. They can live for such a long time. If a yellow eel matures in an estuary or brackish water, usually they mature quicker, and then they'll go all the way back down to the Sargasso Sea to lay their eggs, spawn, and die. But they can actually travel over land, kind of similar to the catfish, because they can breathe air through their gills, but also their skin. And they have a mucus layer, so when someone says slippery as an eel, that's why they actually are very slippery. But as silver eels, they're adults when they look like this guy right here, and also like the picture that I showed you, I'll show again. But these eels, when they're mature, they're actually going through a really amazing physical change when they're migrating back down the Atlantic coast. Their eyes will double in size so that they can see through the deep sea and the ocean better. They'll stop eating, so their gut kind of disintegrates. They're not eating anymore. And when they get back to the Sargasso Sea, the females can lay 20 to 30 million eggs. And then, of course, that life cycle starts all over again for the hatchlings. So really amazing that we're able to see these American eels here on Long Island and throughout the whole East Coast. And sometimes we'll even get a spotting here on Old Ice Pond. But I wanted to thank all of you for watching. We can see if we have any questions, and then we want to show you, of course, the pond behind us where you can see some really great wading birds. And hopefully we can upload a video that we took yesterday of a fish nest, and also of a great egret that was kind of playing with a stick. So we'll upload those for you all to see as well. And then we'll not spawn. What's the word?
Pan?
We'll pan. We'll pan and show you guys.
All right,
this
so
beautiful
bear
pond.
with me for one moment. I'm gonna switch our camera. Whoop. All right. So let me see if I can zoom into this guy for you. There's our egret. Beautiful, right? We also have another egret. Let's see if I can get you to see that one. On our other island, right on the corner there. There we go. So any questions from anyone out there? Beautiful, right? Over on Old Ice Pond. You might have been able to hear in the background all of our beautiful birds singing. We did spot some orioles.
The orioles right now.
Oh yeah, they're flying through the background between our egrets.
Oh, there's an eagle. Oh, it just took off back there.
Oh. And then you also might be able to hear, we have some green frogs right below us where we're standing that have been calling as well. So if you are interested in frogs, take a look at our other video, our other nature news on frogs. Do any animals eat catfish? I believe so, yeah. Sometimes the snapping turtles will eat some of our fish. Raccoons, yeah, absolutely, will also eat fish. Yeah, some of mammals will eat fish. Some of the wading birds will eat some of the fish when they're a bit smaller. And of course, we have the osprey and the eagles hunting on our pond as well. So they'll catch what they can. We don't see our catfish too often, though. We do see them a little bit near our spillway, but not really swimming throughout the pond, not very frequently at all. Any other questions, anybody?
And maybe I could just add as well that we don't allow private kayaks on the pond, but we do have some upcoming programs that are socially distant kayaks that you can look on our website and see if those dates might work for you. But so we don't allow private kayaks because it is a wildlife sanctuary, and we try to keep everything as pristine as possible. Oh, there he goes. But definitely come take a walk, and you can observe all of the wildlife that we have here and check it out.
Just remember, one last thing is no fishing allowed.
Right.
That's how we have all these beautiful fish at the size we have them here. So we just want to keep them protected, and no fishing is allowed at all at the refuge. But you can observe them and check them out right over the viewing decks and say hello to them, and then give them their piece.
It's fun to watch the osprey fish. We've seen them do that from the nature center recently. And yeah, and Judith, if you'd like, on our website we should have all of that information about some of the guided kayaks that we do on Old Ice Pond here at the refuge. So all of that information is on our website, as well as our newsletter that's being mailed really shortly, within the next couple of days. So if you're interested, you can check that out. And we want to thank you all for watching again. We hope you enjoyed this video all about fish, what's beneath the surface of Old Ice Pond, and have a great day.
Just keep swimming.